Chapter 7: Myths and Misconceptions about Dark Psychology. There are numerous topics which are safe for dinner conversation. Dark psychology is not one of them. The last thing you want to ask during Thanksgiving is how Uncle Joe scores as far as their Machiavellianism orientation is concerned. Because of the malevolence surrounding dark psychology, there are usually very few open discussions regarding the topic. Let's take the dark triad test, for instance. Are you planning to take it? If yes, do you plan to share your results with anyone? The high chances are that if you answered yes to the first question, you are probably going to answer no to the second one. Most human beings like to think of themselves as good people. What's more, they like other people to think of them as good people. Putting your dark triad test on display for everyone to see might not exactly serve this purpose. Because of all of this hush-hush surrounding dark psychology, there is, therefore, a whole lot of misconceptions and myths about the personality traits that are key vessels for dark psychology. This chapter explores these myths and misconceptions while shedding some light on the same. Myth number 1: Psychopaths and sociopaths are one and the same thing. Truth: psychopathy and sociopathy are two different types of antisocial personality disorders. The terms psychopath and sociopath are used interchangeably in everyday conversation. However, the two traits are significantly different from each other. That being said, these two personality disorders do share some similarities. Experts consider sociopathy to be a less severe disorder than psychopathy. The table below shows some of the characteristics that distinguish a psychopath from a sociopath. Psychopath. Sociopath. Has no conscience. Has a weak conscience. Are able to blend in by being charming and are therefore harder to spot. Have no intention of blending in and are often easy to spot. Will primarily be interested in themselves only. Cold-hearted and calculating. Hot-headed and leap without looking. Myth number 2: Psychopaths are made and not born. Truth: psychopaths are born that way. Psychopathy is a very complicated personality disorder in that psychopaths are more often born rather than made. A psychopath comes out the womb wired differently than most people. As a result, they deviate from the tangent of what is normal and oftentimes find themselves in positions that any other normal person would not necessarily find themselves in. Research undertaken has indeed shown that the brains of psychopaths function differently when compared to the brains of other people who do not have any recorded personality disorders. So, what happens when a psychopath is born? Depending on the type of environment the psychopath grows up in, the psychopath will become one of several things. If the young child who shows signs of psychopathy grows up in a nurturing environment, he will likely become a business or political leader of much influence. If the child grows up in a violent or traumatic environment, they are likely to become serial killers or murderers. Psychopaths who are nurtured in an environment that is somewhere in between the first two environments end up in positions of power in fields such as law enforcement and management. Myth number 3: Sociopaths are born. Truth: sociopaths are mainly a product of their environments. More often than not, sociopaths are as a result of the environment that they are brought up in. It often starts with a biological or genetic disposition to sociopathy, which is then worsened by the type of nurturing that they get. For instance, a child who grows up in an environment where nobody seems to care for him will probably carry the same lack of empathy in his adulthood. If they grew up with adults who had no sense of integrity and lacked a moral compass, their conscience would be highly impaired as a result. Myth number 4: Females cannot be psychopaths. Truth: there are recorded cases of female psychopaths. More likely than not, when you hear of the term psychopath, you automatically think of a male character. After all, Hollywood has done its best to portray psychopaths as axe-wielding males on a murder spree. However, it is important to note that psychopaths can be female too. Unlike their male counterparts, however, female psychopaths are less likely to be physically aggressive or violent. Rather, they resort to using their sexuality and femininity to manipulate others. Female psychopaths are also likely to have a high number of sexual partners. Myth number 5, psychopaths are obsessed with murder. Truth, psychopaths are thrill seekers. Murder is just one of the ways through which psychopaths quench their desire for the thrill. When most people think of psychopaths, they automatically thinking of murders left, right, and center. However, while it is true that a killer is more likely to be a psychopath than not, it is also true that psychopaths are not thinking of committing murder any more than the rest of the population. Many psychopaths go through their lives seeking thrills and never really causing anybody violent harm. Yes, they might break a few hearts as they jump from one sexual partner to the next and throw several people under the bus in an aim to climb the corporate ladder, but that's as far as most of them go. If you are looking for a psychopath in your life, you will not likely find one if you are only looking for violence and bloodlust. Myth number 6, psychopathy is a mental illness that can be cured. Truth, psychopathy is a personality disorder that has no cure. If psychopathy were a mental illness, there would be an option for treatments. Instead, psychopathy is a personality disorder, and this means that no cure exists that would turn psychopaths into normal, feeling, and empathetic human beings. Because they really do not believe that anything is wrong with them anyway, psychopaths would not even be interested in treatment even if it existed. In instances where psychopaths have been convinced to get into therapy for purposes of mending existing relationships, it is not uncommon to find them trying to manipulate the therapist into thinking that the therapy is working or has already worked. Remember, these individuals are highly manipulative and capable of utilizing whatever means necessary to get themselves out of difficult situations. Thanks to their bold lack of fear and absence of empathy, a psychopath will have no problem wasting a loved one's time in therapy, if only to make it seem like they are making an effort. Myth number 7, you can change a person on the dark triad by loving them correctly. Truth, most people who score highly on the dark triad test remain so for the rest of their lives. Love is a strange thing in that it makes people believe that they are capable of the impossible, even when the truth is laid bare before their eyes. If you are in a relationship with a person who scores highly on the dark triad test, the first few months of your relationship are likely to be blissful. Manipulative people have a way of love bombing you into believing that they are the perfect match that you have been waiting for all along. Unfortunately, this is usually just an attempt to lure and entrap you into a relationship that is just smoke and mirrors. Once you have settled into this kind of relationship, the manipulator's true colors come to light. In many cases, you will find a relationship partner sticking around with the hope that things will change. That love will be enough to turn things around. Unfortunately, this often never happens. For starters, the fact that psychopathy is mostly genetic means that it is incredibly difficult to defeat. At best, the psychopath can only channel their lack of sensitivity towards achieving goals that are not detrimental to the overall society. As for Machiavellianism and narcissism, these often stem from deep psychological trauma that may require a whole lot of arsenal to overcome. Many people will gravitate towards Machiavellianism and narcissism as a defense mechanism. Any attempt to get them out of this will only come across as an attack, thus causing them to launch their own defense. As such, intervention in the form of love may be incredibly counterproductive. It is also necessary to acknowledge that love and other flippant emotions are not exactly a dark triad person's cup of tea. They may not even notice it for what it is. As such, should you find yourself in a relationship with a person who exhibits the characteristics of the dark triad, you might want to re-examine whether that is what you really want. Myth number 8, people who score highly on the dark triad are more attractive. Truth, this has been established to be untrue. Why is it that people often gravitate towards the narcissists and the psychopaths of this world? Is it because the dark triad personalities are more attractive than the rest of us? In a bid to determine whether dark triad personalities are better looking, academic researchers took to studying several subjects who had high dark triad scores. The results of these studies suggested that the reason why these subjects appeared attractive was because they dressed up and presented themselves physically in a manner that was well put together. When dressed down in boring clothes, these subjects did not appear as attractive as before. As such, it is almost safe to assume that the attention and effort that goes into getting ready and the confidence thereafter are what makes a narcissist or psychopath seem more attractive than they really are. Myth number 9, psychopaths change when they have children. Truth, psychopaths are unable to have emotions of empathy or caring even towards their own children. Psychopaths start their own families, and when this happens, they usually have a very hard time nurturing their offspring. Unlike normal parents who are not on the dark triad scale, psychopaths have a hard time distinguishing their children as separate entities. Rather, they consider them to be tools or extension of themselves, which are available for their use as they please. Psychopaths are more likely to view their children as trophies that make them look good than as young, impressionable individuals who are looking for someone to guide them through life. As such, a typical psychopath will push their kids to excel in something they have no interest in, even though this is at the expense of the kids' mental health and well-being. They might forcefully enroll the kids in swimming classes, for instance, because they believe their kid becoming an expert swimmer and competitor will improve their social standing in the community. Needless to say, psychopath parents are very hard to please, seeing that they are used to excelling themselves and will not understand why their kids will not do whatever it takes to get to the top. Myth number 10, you are either on the dark triad or not. Truth, the dark triad is a continuum on which some score highly while others score lowly. The traits of narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism are inherent in all of us. The only difference is that in some people, these traits are magnified to the point where they often become destructive to the people around them. Take narcissism, for instance. Everybody has a way that they think about themselves. More likely than not, you like to think good things about yourself. You like to believe that you are good-looking and talented and easy to love. For a narcissist, this self-image is blown out of proportion to the extent where their entire life revolves around. It is not enough for them to believe these things about themselves, they also want everyone else to believe they are perfect and saintly and all things good. Psychopathy, on the other hand, is also a spectrum. Everybody has their place on this spectrum. Think of it this way: have you ever done something that was not so nice and yet did not feel guilty about it? Have you ever acted in a manner to suggest that you are not exactly empathetic towards someone? If you have answered yes to any of these questions, then you exhibited psychopathic traits at least once in your life. This does not mean that you will go on to murder someone later in your life. It only means that there are instances when the psychopath in you comes out, and other instances when you might be able to catch yourself just in time. The way you were raised has an effect on whether you are able to stop yourself from unleashing your full psychopath. Myth number 11, your boss is a psychopath. Truth, your boss may or may not be a psychopath. It is true that many psychopaths who do not become career criminals go on to become highly successful in business, politics, and other fields. However, this is not reason enough to accuse your boss of being a psychopath. Some people are simply driven and demanding because it is what they know and understand to be the requirement for success. In any case, not a whole lot of people have sleepovers and brunches with their bosses. There is a certain dynamic expected from a boss-employee relationship. Your tough-talking, merciless boss may be a completely different person when they are not wearing their boss hat. Do not go thinking that everyone in authority positions is a sociopath or psychopath. It does not always work that way. Myth number 12, your ex is a psycho. Truth, a relationship ended on a sour note. This does not make any of you a psycho. A lot of people are fond of referring to their exes as psychos. Every once in a while, a relationship will end on a good note where both parties go on to become great friends for the rest of their lives. Unfortunately, this is not how most relationships play out. Many courtships end in tears and accusations and name-calling. Before you call your ex a psychopath, Evaluate the signs elaborated in this book and find out whether your ex's behavior matches any of these. Of course, this should not matter if you are done with the relationship, but it might help you avoid falling into the same trap of dating someone who exhibits the same signs. If you are currently involved with someone who shows any of the signs discussed here, you might want to consider leaving them for your own safety. It is important to acknowledge that the process of leaving a psychopath or narcissist is different from that of leaving a normal person who does not take the departure as an affront to their own person. There are numerous resources that are available to persons who are looking to leave abusive and manipulative relationships. These resources can be found through a simple online search.